Why, hello there. Greetings to you. Thank you for joining me. I'm just doing a short little broadcast this afternoon, and it's a personal celebration. I'm celebrating a milestone I'm reaching today, and that has to do with my big research project. The name of the project is "The Physician's Highest and Only Calling." I'll actually talk about that phrase in a couple of minutes. But the milestone or the scope of the project and where I'm at now is I set it out as a basically a 28-year kind of marathon project, right? And it started on October 1st, 2017. And the basic idea of the project is that I would fully commit myself to never missing a single day of study of my fields, right? Of dynamic philosophy, dynamic science, at a minimum of every morning 30 to 60 minutes studying one of the classic texts, and then I write some reflections and notes on whatever I've read that morning. But yeah, so today is day number 2000. I have not missed a single day in 2000 days. That's the number of days since October 1st, 2017. And I am now on book number 67. And that is, for whatever that's worth, that's just kind of arbitrary. I don't have a set quota, how many pages I need to read per month or anything like that. It's a time commitment, not missing a day. And as I say, I'm now here on day 2000. And I'd just like to spend a few minutes. I mean, I'm celebrating, I'm happy, and it's always nice to hit a big goal or a big milestone. And I just wanted to share a few of the lessons that I've learned in this process. Now it's going to continue. I don't stop today, but I've certainly been learning as I go. And I just have some of my notes here. If you see me turning over to my right, I'm just checking on my notes what I've wanted to remind myself about. And yeah, that's what I said at the beginning. The name of the big research project is called "The Physician's Highest and Only Calling." Now, if you have studied Heilkunst like me, that's probably a very familiar phrase to you. It's right in the first aphorism in Hahnemann's classic textbook, the Organon of Medicine, or the Organon of Heilkunst. And in that first aphorism, he says it starts with that phrase, "the physician's highest and only calling," and then the sentence continues from there. It's about the physician having this highest calling to cure the diseases of their patient, and then there's a long footnote. He's kind of comparing the goal of Heilkunst as different from allopathic medicine. In allopathic medicine, they don't actually cure, and of course he spends his whole life really talking about all the problems of allopathic medicine. But right there in that first aphorism, he's distinguishing himself from this very failed project of allopathic medicine, and he's setting out what the Heilkunst physician does, starting with this phrase I just said, "the physician's highest and only calling." And now he's talking in that very specific way, comparing Heilkunst to allopathic medicine, and what's the difference, and what is his whole philosophy about, and how do you practice, and how do you cure the patient. Like he gets very specific about all these things. But that phrase, I mean, it has many meanings, but it's always really stuck with me, and that's why I adopted it to be the name of my project, in that it really speaks not only to all the specific teachings that Hahnemann is bringing forward, but he's really bringing forward this much deeper philosophy, of what does it mean to be a physician? What does it mean to practice medicine? What does it mean to, it's both an art and a science, and what is that art and what is that science? But particularly from the point of view of how is that physician kind of drawing something, this kind of higher desire out of themselves in terms of what they do in the world, right? The physician's highest and only calling. So, as I say, there's many dimensions, many implications of that. But that's the phrase I borrowed. That's the name of this project. So, to me, yes, of course, Hahnemann does all these teachings about treating the patient and curing the disease and how you do all these things, and that's the work of Heilkunst, right? That's the day-to-day meat potatoes of the whole thing. But as I say, there's a much deeper implied philosophy in all that, in I guess this is one of the things that differentiates Heilkunst from allopathic medicine. One of the big philosophical things is that Heilkunst is not a mechanical approach to the human being, or to to life and to health and to the science of all of that, where allopathic medicine is very mechanical. It's like, okay, well, we have this body part over here. It's treated like a car. We can either take out this part and replace it with with a new part, an organ donor or whatever the case is, or a mechanical part. They make some body parts now that are surgically implanted, and that's okay at one level. Like, if somebody needs a part replaced, then we replace the part. That's what a surgeon would do. But in the broader approach to health and medicine and what the human being really is, it's like, yes, we may have an aspect of our physical body which can be reduced to those mechanisms, and we can study that and replace knees, surgically, and do all that wonderful kind of thing. But at the highest level, this is what Hahnemann's phrase means: the physician's highest and only calling. It's a calling to really the what is the highest reality of what a human being is. It's not their mechanical nature. It's the highest part of what you can say, what is our human consciousness, what is our creativity, what is that that spirit nature of the human being, and what's happening in disease, as far as kind of a corruption happening of really the core nature of the human being. So all of these bigger questions, which take us out of a mechanical definition of the human being, and and other things along these lines, are implied in that phrase, the physician's highest and only calling. So, as I say, that's what I named this project. Here I am on day 2000, and I wanted to share. As I said, I'm now on my 67th book. Um, I suppose I could talk about each and every one of them, even at one minute each. That would that would take us just over an hour. But yeah, I don't want to quite do that rapid fire style of video. I thought I picked out three particular books which are particularly meaningful and significant to me, that I learned a lot from. In fact, they're books that I have read and reread, and you keep getting deeper and deeper meaning out of. So I just want to share some of the learnings from these three books. So let me just turn to my notes for a second here. Yeah, the first book is actually one that I read something like 20 plus years ago, when I was initially a student of Heilkunst. And for this project, almost 2,000 days ago, almost 5 years ago, is when I actually reread this book. So of course it was a much more enriching book for me the second time I read it. Now, with my 22 years of practice in Heilkunst, it gave me such a deeper sense of insight and learning and everything from it, because I have so much more experience that I can apply to the concepts in the book. Right? It's just it's multidimensional for me now. So, anyways, this first book has a title, of course. It's called "The Wholeness of Nature," and actually, I didn't write down the subtitle. Has something to do with exploring the holistic science of Goethe. Right, Goethean science, as we call it. So the wholeness of nature. The author is a French author, Henri Bortoft, and yeah, he does a fantastic job in this book. It's a really great, like, one of the best places to really learn about things. If you're studying a certain field, especially if it's more complex, or there's more of a difficult to understand philosophy, more difficult language, and all the rest of it. Of course, we always have our primary literature, the original authors who wrote in that field. That's always a good starting point. But a book like The Wholeness of Nature by Bortoft is actually, in the category of secondary literature. And when it's a good book like this, it can really go very far, take you very far in better understanding the primary literature. Because usually the originator, like Hahnemann, in developing his Heilkunst, and Wilhelm Reich in orgonomy, and Rudolf Steiner in anthroposophy, these were three incredible geniuses. And we have so much to be thankful for what they brought to the world and what they've taught us. But they can be a little more dense, take a lot more time to really study and read and really unpack what they're saying, because they, for all the reasons of what we normally talk about, the challenges of translation. Well, this is a kind of a problem of translation where one of these great geniuses lays down their thoughts, in their books, but then sort of an ordinary normal mortal like you or I, we have to translate that language of genius into our everyday kind of thinking. It's like, oh, what are they saying here? And why do they use this word? That's so weird. And, we kind of go through that problem of translation. So these great secondary pieces of literature, such as Bortoff's Wholeness of Nature, is a really great translation for us non-geniuses to really understand Goethe's scientific writing, and how we can really apply that whole philosophy and science of living nature as opposed to mechanical nature, which I was talking about earlier in allopathic medicine. So yeah, that Wholeness of Nature is a great book, and as I say, it takes us out of that whole allopathic worldview, which sees life as mechanical, and all the problems of the allopathic philosophy. And it what it brings to the foreground, this is what Goethean science does. This is also what Steiner very much does. Later on, this is what Reich does as well. Is he brings out this idea that the way that living science needs to be practiced is, fully dependent on what's going on with, like, who that scientist is doing that science, right? We can't just think of ourselves as some kind of detached objective observer, but the fact that we as the scientist or as the practitioner ourselves are alive. We are a living process, and we're using our faculties and our sensations, our inner life sensations, our, the dynamic processes of just being alive and being a thinking being. That's a vital part of the whole operation of when we bring that into the equation of, how we are participating our patient, or whatever the life science is you're practicing. You're kind of bringing your life energy, your life process onto the living process that you're studying. So I'm just, that's a big general point, but the Bortoff book goes into a lot of detail and really fleshes things out. It's a really good teaching book, but I'm just kind of going to give you the big picture like that. That's what this book, The Wholeness of Nature, does a great job at, at all these different levels. So that's the first of three books. The second one is another book. Actually, I'm currently rereading it right now. I'm near the end again. It's a book I've read many times over the last 20 years. And this is a book by Rudolf Steiner. So like I said a minute ago, you get the challenge of how do you read this more kind of densified expression of the mind of a genius, right? And there are great truths in it. Like every page, every paragraph, it's kind of smacking you on the side of the head, and you just keep saying like, wow, like, wow, wow. It's just like being woken up by a cold shower, every 30 seconds of your day, right? It's just this kind of powerful kind of thought process that he takes you through. But as I say, I've read and reread this book many times for that reason, to really kind of get a better sense of unpacking it. And did I even say the title yet? So it's Rudolf Steiner's book, Philosophy of Freedom. It's one of the earliest books he wrote in 1894. And then actually he did a second edition. He kind of rewrote it in a certain way in 1918, about 25 years later. And the two books are essentially the same, but a lot of kind of key clarifications he brought in the book. So this is one piece of advice I'd give to anyone trying to tackle this book is, one, take your time, really, like as they say with good nutrition and everything, you want to chew your food properly and take your time, and you don't want to just gulp your food down quickly and then get indigestion, right? Definitely don't want to do that with this book. You want to take your time. You really want to dig into it. Take time to think and reflect, and even put the book down and go for a walk and kind of have this reflective time. And actually, one of the great benefits at the moment is that I'm in a study group at the moment. This is the book we're studying, and each week we read and then regroup and review one of the chapters of this book. And this group study process has actually taken all my 20 years of tackling this book, and it's really helping me consolidate and bring a lot more insight to the process. So yeah, this book, Philosophy of Freedom, as I said, first came out in 1894, second edition in 1918, and one about a year and a half ago, another great insight was kind of presented to me to really help me understand the book, and that is borrowing on a short lecture series that Steiner did, also I think around the year 1918, although that certainly wasn't the first time he had thought of those concepts. The lecture series was called Human and Cosmic Thought, and he essentially presents the whole structure of human thinking and human consciousness, where we have a possibility and a tendency to kind of, any one of us to be in, at any given time, to be in one of 12 different worldviews, right? Like if you think of the 4 points on a compass, and then expand out the 4 into the 12 points on a clock, right? You get this kind of idea of kind of a cycle, or a set of, like a collection of things that kind of interrelate to each other, but just from different perspectives. So it's sort of like that. The human being, we have this tendency to kind of possibly cycle through different worldviews, like, and each one of us will have a tendency to be dominant in one or a couple of those worldviews. And then, so that's the 12. And then there's another part in the lecture series that he points out. We also have a possibility of 7 different soul moods, right? So the 12 is like the numbers on the clock, and the 7 is another significant number as far as the structure of our consciousness. But anyways, that was a separate lecture he did. But the insight that was presented to me was, in fact, the structure of this great book, Philosophy of Freedom, is actually structured on those 12 worldviews and those 7 soul moods, right? So if you this book, Philosophy of Freedom, it's a 14-chapter book. So that's, in that structure, you get the 7 soul moods presented kind of in one direction in the first half of the book, the first 7 chapters, and then the second set of 7 chapters from 8 to 14, you get those 7 soul moods again, but now presented in reverse order. So Steiner never says this. He doesn't say, hey, look at my book, Philosophy of Freedom. I have the 14 chapters because of these 7 soul moods. And then within each chapter, he goes through step by step each of the 12 worldviews. So you get this kind of 12 times 7, for the first half of the book, 84 different perspectives. And then again, you get another 84 perspectives in the second half of the book. So Steiner never tells you this. But as I say, some really insightful person put 2 and 2 together. And I'd say because of that, and now being in this study group, I am getting so much deeper insights from the book, because I can actually see the underlying thought process. Without having that framework, you kind of have to struggle with the book and fight, and like fight for insights, and it's just kind of, it's a bit of a crazy thing, because you read it, and you pull your hair out, and you go a little bit crazy in the process. But yeah, so now that I know the actual thought structure underneath the book, I'm actually getting a lot more ground with it than I ever have. So that's just kind of my overall insight, just the actual process of how to study the book and how to actually figure out where Steiner was coming from. There's many, of course, deeper insights. And one of my projects I'm working on at the moment, as I restudy this book, I actually am putting together an introductory course to the book, to how to study Philosophy of Freedom. But I'm doing it from a special perspective. I'm going to teach Philosophy of Freedom, like everything I've just said. I'm going to give the structure of the book and the key insights you get along the way. But I'm going to wrap it up and present it under the, like presenting it as far as the insights you can take from that book and apply them to Heilkunst medicine. That's a way that I think. I'm always looking for greater insight in Heilkunst, and this book, it does that, of course. It really gives you insight into the whole process of human science and human thinking, and how we do that. But I'm particularly going to focus on the insight that you can take from that book and apply it to Heilkunst medicine. So, anyways, that's a work in progress. Of course, I will certainly let you know when when you could participate in my study course, because I think anyone interested in Heilkunst, in Steiner, all these things, will certainly be interested in that. So I look forward to bringing that out to you when it's a little bit more ready. So that's the book number two. The third book, and I forget at the moment, I have to check my notes. Oh, yes, I remember. Um, and this is interesting. So the whole study project is largely focused on the writings of Hahnemann, Steiner, and Reich. I did mention the book by Borthoff, which is actually more of a teaching about Goethean science. So that's a little bit adjacent to all that. But most of my readings have been in those big three writers. And this other book I want to highlight, one of my three, is it's a book, again, it's not by Hahnemann, Reich, or Steiner, although it is someone very close to Reich, and that was Reich's son, Peter Reich, in the early 1970s. He wrote basically an autobiography about himself and being a child of Reich and what it was like growing up with him as his father, and the early life experiences. That was such a beautiful book. I've read so much of Wilhelm Reich himself, all his scientific experiments and his theories, and that's very dense scientific work. Speaking of all the dense geniuses that I mentioned earlier, but his son Peter Reich, he didn't follow in his father's footsteps as far as becoming a scientist and doing all that work. He was certainly around it. He knew what his father was doing, and he certainly has known after the fact, the historical impact, and he's kind of part of that whole community in that sense. But this biography he wrote in the early 1970s, as I say, is so beautiful because, yes, it gives you some of the insights into how Reich was working and some of the opposition he was facing in the world. And in fact, the great tragedy of the end of Reich's life was, that he was imprisoned and he died in prison. And of course, there's some controversy or debate. Did he die of a heart attack, or was he poisoned, or like by the federal agents, or whatever the case? Regardless of what happened there, it certainly is a tragedy. Like, if you think of what science and insight Reich could have continued to bring to the world, like what he already did was amazing, but where he could have gone, in his remaining decades of a natural lifespan, the tragedy of all that. So yeah, so his son Peter Reich, as I say, so beautifully brings this out as a biography of himself, but portraying his father, portraying what the work did in the world, and I was just really, really taken by the book. As I say, it just not just to learn about his own biography and what it was like, to be his Reich's son and to grow up that way, but you really get kind of a perspective on the father, Wilhelm Reich, that you don't get directly in Reich's writings. You really get this human feeling in this picture of what that man was about, right? As a father, but a scientist who was a father who was a scientist. Like, it's such a beautiful book. It really stuck with me, of one of the 67 books I've read so far. So that's sort of the bulk of what I wanted to talk about today. I'm celebrating this day number 2000, book number 67. But yeah, if nothing else, this is kind of the whole reason I started this 28-year project in the first place. Is I kind of got to a point, like, it wasn't that I'd never have done any of these studies before. Obviously, I have, but I realized, as every day of your life ticks by, there's, like, every time you miss a day of doing what's supposedly the most important thing to you, is, you miss a day, you miss a week, you miss a month sometimes. It's like, okay, well, got to get back on the horse again. But I didn't want to ever fall off the horse. That's what I decided. So I started, and here I am 2000 days later. I haven't fallen off the horse. Of course, there are days occasionally, if I'm a little under the weather or tired, or as typical, I have a lot of things to do as far as running, the clinic and treating my patients and doing all this stuff. Like, my days are always busy. So to have this commitment to always start with this, this study, this activity of studying in the morning, I could always find something else to do at that time if I wanted to, right? But yeah, this whole idea of making a commitment to this highest goal in my life has really, has really helped me to grow. Like, as far as what it takes to really have commitment and motivation and really be connected to, what's that expression? To put your money where your mouth is. It's like, yeah, you can you say you can fall off the horse for a week, a day, or a month or whatever, and that does not feel good. But yeah, to really, really put your money where your mouth is, as I just said, yeah, has really taught me a lot about what it really means to to have a priority, to truly prioritize what you say you want to in life, and not just give lip service. So that's about what I wanted to say today. Yeah, if anything else, and I have my last note here. So yeah, that's where I've been, for the last 2,000 days. I've been making videos. You may have watched some of them along the way with me. But yeah, more and more, like I want to kind of further focus this project into more kind of community projects. I don't know what that will mean exactly, whether some form of book club, discussing certain books, some form of communal research projects, or some way we can share our ideas and research and bring things together in a concrete way. I don't know exactly how that's going to look yet, but for what it's worth, kind of keep your eye on the horizon. This is, for me, the next logical step of where I want to take all the reading and all the research. It has to go out into the world. It has to help other people who are interested in this, who kind of want to be side by side with me, and actually kind of do some positive good in the world. Let's say it's interesting for me if I sit and read books every day, but yeah, I want to also see this kind of go out into the world that much further. So thank you so much. This is my 2,000 day celebration. Thank you for joining me. And yeah, I will see you hopefully much sooner than 2,000 days from now.